first thing we were looking for is how do we get closer to the business so you understand what's going on? So then you can provide actual solutions that help them.
Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. Our broadcast today features a panel from our Metis Strategy Summit from October 29th. The topic of the conversation is next-gen talent operating models, and the panelists who joined us for the discussion were Teddy Bekele, the Chief Technology Officer of Land O'Lakes, Soumya Seetharam, the Chief Digital Information Officer of Corning, and Tigran Khrimian, the Chief Technology Engineering Officer of FINRA. I hope you enjoy the conversation.
Welcome to each of you. Thank you so much for taking time for this. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Such a important topic. Soumya, let me begin with you. You are the tech leader at Corning, as I mentioned, a 173-year-old company based in Corning, New York. No coincidence. And you and I had recently had a great conversation where you talked about a three-pronged approach that you have to developing talent. You talked about first, look for talent where it is. Second, upskill your talent. And third, ensure that you're focusing on your pipeline. And I wonder if you could take a few minutes and unwind each of those as to the importance, why those are the three, and maybe a little bit of insight associated with each as well, if you don't mind.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and great to be here. So Corning is a 173-year-old company, and we're in about 27 countries across the world. And we have 50,000 associates, as we call them, across the company. And when you're looking for digital and IT, we have a team of about 2,000 people who do all of this work. And what I realized was there was a lot that was being done at HQ and, some main hubs. Our main hubs over here in the US are Corning, New York, and Charlotte, North Carolina. So a lot of our talent was based over there, but the business operations is all over the world. So the first thing we were looking for is how do we get closer to the business so you understand what's going on? So then you can provide actual solutions that help them. So we created these strategic digital and IT hubs. We have a hub in Shanghai. We have a hub in Taiwan. We have a hub in Budapest, in Pune in India, and a new one in Mexico, in addition to Charlotte and Corning. So that helped us create an avenue for us to get talent globally and not just rely on everything being done in the US. Time zones, et cetera, are not very conducive to helping the business with that. So that's the first thing. We very, very deliberately said we're going to have hubs. We're going to hire in those hubs. And the Shanghai hub is, particularly important for us because we do a lot of business in China. And we want that hub to focus on in China, for China, with data privacy considerations and all the AI regulations coming up. We want to keep that over there. But the rest of the hubs work on things across the globe. The other thing we did is also we chose hubs where we can partner with our supply chain team, our HR team, and our finance team. So where shared services sits, we try to put people over there. And that kind of is the GBS model, but we're actually taking it beyond that. It's not just GBS, it's innovation hubs is what we're calling it. The second thing we did is we have 2,000 people, but if you look at all the new emerging tech, there's 200 of the 2,000 were involved in it. And the remaining 1,800 felt like they were second-tier citizens. They weren't doing the cool stuff. They're taking care of the legacy applications, and it felt like they were the unheralded workforce. So we actually launched a digital literacy program. We tried it the first year I started in the company, and we provided them access to technology. But what we noticed was there's only 20% of them who took advantage of it. So we're like, okay, when you give it to them, it's not as important. We made it part of a strategy this year and put objectives about learning and development. And we created 1 day a week of time where there are no meetings. It's called Revitalization Day, and it's day for them to actually upskill themselves. So that's the second thing we've done. And the last thing is the pipeline. We only had interns in the US. We've now got intern programs in all the hub locations. And then we also actually pivoted. I come from 14 years at GE, so I'm really stealing some of those professional development techniques we had over there. We have a rotational development program in digital and IT. So interns who are, selected to become full-time hires, they don't go into a full-time job. They go into the rotational development program where they do 4 rotations of 6 months each in different areas of digital and IT. Mandatory one in infrastructure, mandatory one in project management, and the other two, they can pick what their interests are. So they can understand better everything that we do in IT, and it creates a leadership pipeline for us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well articulated and well thought out clearly as well. Teddy, I want to turn to you, the Chief Technology Officer of Land O'Lakes. As I mentioned, you've been in that role for a little more than 6 years. You've been with the company about double that now, the senior most technologist at the company. You zigged where a lot have zagged when it comes to the thought process around talent. Yours is a company in excess of $10 billion in revenue, and you have a team of 255 people. You have about triple that amount, a little less than triple that amount as contractors as well. And you talk about how your team provides strategy and leadership, and the work is then done by third parties, contractors, et cetera. And I wonder, talk a bit about the logic behind that model, why that was compelling. And if I could ask you, among other insights you might provide on with the thought process around the possibility of cost reasons, speed, value, flexibility, nimbleness. How do you think about the kind of order of value that you derive from a model like yours?
Yeah, absolutely. So, if you rewind back maybe 5 or 6 years ago, we were probably 50-50, right? So we have 50% in-house, 50% outside. And it just didn't work. And the 50% in-house was focused in specific areas, right? We said these are the areas that we're going to go deep in, and then the rest of it we're going to outsource. And that model whenever you had to cut resources or we had to shrink, you're getting rid of your own employees along with the contractors, because in some areas you didn't have depth. So we just had to let employees go. And so we had to decide either we're going to insource or go all the way through. And then we decided, we're going to go all in and go from that sort of siloed model to more of a T-shaped model with like the T being really long. And everybody knows a little bit about everything, but not go too deep. And then we use the third parties, which we have good strategic partners for that, for the arms and legs and the expertise. So to answer your question, Peter, I think number one reason is the expertise. We're not going to be able to develop, expertise in Salesforce or deep capabilities in AI, et cetera. Like there's some really good companies out there that know how to do that. But our team needs to know, number one, how to direct traffic. And number two, know enough to where they can have a solid technical conversation with those individuals. So we shifted more to that model. And along with that, the discussion we had this morning about the product operating model, we've been in that product model for quite some time. That actually enabled both the product teams and the capability teams, those are the tech central teams, to sort of have that key people on the team to be the internal resources and then extend with the third parties. The other piece I would say, so that, that expertise piece is important. The second one was the flexibility. Now, as the company contracts or expands, we have the ability to flex up and down as we need to. And that really works out really well. And also at the time, you might get a contractor or you might get a consultant or even a whole company altogether that it's just not working out, right? So it's not like an employee where like you have to have, performance reviews and all that. It's like, look, if it's not working out, 30 days, you're out, right? Not that we like to have like those kind of combative, but we've had a couple of those, right? So it gives us now the ability to flex up and down as needed. And the third one I'll say is nimbleness. Company might change where we go, right? One day, one thing is important. The next day, something else is. So how can we shift and go find somebody else who can help us in that space? So I would say those are probably the major drivers for it. The cost component, not so much. I mean, usually when you do something like this, it doesn't cost you less. It costs you more. But again, we're very judicious about where we spend those dollars and how we put them in play. Now, the other piece is the employees. I always talk to them about how treasured they are. You're 255. I mean, you're the best, right? And so my job is to make sure that you have a good experience here, and that we retain you for the long run.
Staying with you for just a moment longer to linger on the point, to what extent does being a cooperative as opposed to being a publicly traded company facilitate a thought process like what you've described?
Yeah, and the cooperative, I mean, it's been around for 102 years now. And the idea, I mean, we always say in the company that the goal here is going to be here for another 100 years. And we want people that sort of share the same values as an organization. And just for a second, cooperative meaning our shareholders are our customers in some cases and our suppliers, right? So our dairy producers that help us make and give us the milk to make butter and cheese is one side. And then we have a huge contingent on the ag side, which are row crop farmers and ag retailers. So our net income at the end of the day goes back to them in the form of patronage. I mean, they sometimes live paycheck to paycheck. So we're using their dollars to kind of create this company and keep it going. And so there is this kind of affinity to the, hey, we're here to create a better place. Those farmers are doing that. We want to enable them to do that. And that sort of philosophy of making sure that like you are mission driven. You're here because you're driving a mission. It's pretty clear what we do. And we even have a tagline called "Make It Possible." So the IT is kind of a play. Our marketing folks are really clever with it. But instead of the it, sometimes we make farmers do better things with their land possible. And so that gives our team that sort of sense of belonging, that sense of a mission. And that's really what keeps us together. And I'm sure we'll talk about more distributed models in a second. So.
Yeah, very good. Thank you for that, Teddy. Tigran, I want to move to you, again, the Chief Technology Engineering Officer at FINRA, the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, only 85 years in business, so relatively new compared to these companies. So I wanted to ask you, I mean, for those who don't know this, FINRA is an extraordinary user of data. So some of the statistics here, an exabyte of data that you are processing, you spin up daily, 150,000 servers process that data, 150,000. You have cutting edge artificial intelligence that you're leveraging to detect anomalies in market activity, to, for example, to detect insider trading, among other use cases and so on. In thinking about how unique your use case is and thinking about developing expertise in an area where no one truly knows what good looks like at your scale, let's say few do. I don't want to be too hyperbolic, but how do you think about growing expertise in some of these areas where the scale is very different from where people have been previously?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure.
Great to be here, guys. Very kind of a big data space where we have to do a lot of processing of exchange information. At the end of the day, all the exchanges send us the data. We have to link that with the broker-dealer data, create that graph, and be able to run anomaly detection. Is there manipulation? Are people getting the best price? So our mission is market integrity and investor protection. So we have deep learning algorithms that run on top of that data, trying to find those anomalies, trying to find market misbehavior. Back in the days, and then the market volumes are growing 20, 30% year over year. And when the flash crash happens, within one day, you triple the amount of data. So at some point, we're like, either we have to provision in our data centers to handle this volume, or we can go to the cloud. So in 2014, we made a decision to go to the cloud because of that capacity. Prior to the cloud, we were handling all that data volume within appliances, IBM Netezza. These are vertically scaled software solutions. Greenplum, which was later was bought by VMware. And challenge was that we were running out of space, as I mentioned before, and to bring a server to put next to it to start moving the data was incredibly very difficult thing to do. We would spend weekends and to do that operational work. So 2014, we decided to go to the cloud, but at that point, from the vertical compute, we're going to go horizontal. The companies like Cloudera, Hortonworks, Hadoop become a thing that we can process this data in a commodity hardware rather than this exotic hardware. And we partnered with them. We partnered with AWS as well. And similar to Capital One, Story, and other folks who are all into the cloud, we also went all into the cloud. And, we've done this in two phases. Like within 5 to 6 years, we completely moved out of our data centers, moved to the cloud. But now we're talking about talent. How did we augment? We augmented expertise from, as I mentioned, Cloudera, Hortonworks. Those are the people who knew how to process large data. We didn't. We were a SQL shop back then. We tried to hire people outside. Nobody knew. We would go to consultants. They would try to come and charge us lots of money to learn on our dime. So we said no to that. Fundamentally, we adopted a strategy when we went to the cloud is buy what you can, build what you must. We made the bet at that time that data is going to be a strategic asset. So we're going to actually build our own data lake in the cloud. And we need those experts from AWS to build with us and, that was the augmentation of expertise coming from all these builders of the actual foundational platforms to come teach us. We learned, we hired people, and we also have a hybrid posture. We're about 1,600 people, predominantly in Maryland, and the rest are in different states. So that gave us that extra muscle where, now we're a data company, and we're actually trying to maximize on the value of that data.
Very interesting. Yeah, what a remarkable journey. Thank you for sharing a bit about that. Soumya, I want to go back to you. You cannot have a group like this and not have a good portion of people that have GE in their background. It is the most extraordinary diaspora of tech talent, and Soumya is one of those, spending, I think it's a decade and a half roughly at GE companies. And forgive me, it seems as though you have taken some of what works well and translated it into your current environment. You've talked about implementing mid-career rotational programs. Now, oftentimes GE was known for beginning of career rotational programs, but also additionally beyond that as well. Talk a bit about how you've implemented that. I think it's such a fantastic way to think about things, to keep the opportunities fresh, to provide opportunities to great people and keep them. But talk a bit about how it's applied in an organization like Corning, please.
Yeah, the situation for me was there are people with long tenures in Corning. People don't really leave. They work there. There's multi-generational, families that have worked in the company. And so people had been in the same vertical for decades. And so they were really deep. To your tea analogy, they were really deep, but they didn't have the breadth. And when I'm trying to do succession planning and I'm trying to look at, hey, what are the opportunities? There was a stagnation at different layers within the organization. So that was what actually facilitated the thought process that, hey, we need to look at even mid-career people and give them experiences, because we all don't have the skill set to keep up with the changing world. And we focus on the pipeline, but then once people reached senior manager level, other than general leadership training, there's not much else that we can offer. It was a mindset change that we needed them to think about. If you are in digital and IT and you're mid-career, you not only have the ownership of keeping operations up and running and making sure things are going fine, but you have the responsibility of making sure you're looking at what's out there, what are the trends, and how are you bringing that in. So we're looking at a mid-career rotational program. And one of the early successes we've had is I had a director who was deep SAP expert, moved her into an infrastructure role. And that's drastic. And it was a great learning experience for her. And in fact, like 2 years in, we kicked off an ERP transformation and said, hey, you want to come back? And she's like, I'm having too much fun in infrastructure. I don't want to come back. The other thing is it gives perspective. You can always complain and say, hey, that group isn't doing this group isn't. But if you go live in their shoes, you understand the challenges they face. So that's the whole point of the mid-career rotation program, is to help not only give them different experiences, rotate them out so they're better rounded and we can have more movement within the organization. So
that's fantastic. Thank you so much. What an interesting story. I want to stay with you for a moment longer, because you also share with me some of you've spoken about how certain trends have emerged that allowed non-technologists to take on greater technology responsibilities. One thinks of citizen development, low code, no code, certainly artificial intelligence and so on. And if anything, Gen AI is accelerating this. Talk a bit about how you think about that, building non-traditional tech talent among people that do not have technology backgrounds. How does that apply at Corning?
Yeah, before I came to Corning, I worked in Schlumberger and Intel, very engineering-oriented companies, and people who really considered themselves experts in data and technology. So you'd find people everywhere in the company who were doing some kind of analytics. And it got easier and easier for them to do that with low-code, no-code options. People have that analytical mindset. They really want to work with it. And there's only so much capacity in any digital and IT organization to take care of the business. So what I created was this concept of digital cells. So how many of you have shadow IT or people in the businesses doing IT stuff? I think a lot of us do. But instead of calling them shadow IT, if there's talent over there, why don't we tap into it, make them an extension of our philosophy and technology strategy, give them a playbook and say, here's how you can operate within this safely. We also did one additional thing. We had a role called digital concierge. They were like the help desk for the people in the business on how to do things themselves safely. So they were in IT and they helped them. But the other thing they did was every quarter they would go audit them and say, how much value did you actually do, or were you just playing around? Because if you're doing this seriously, you should be driving value for the business. So it kind of helped. So I truly believe in the future, every person in every function will have some aspect of technology as part of their role. So why not help them with the right ways of doing it, have like a affiliation to digital and IT so they can do it freely instead of hiding from IT. And so
Come the shadows.
Yeah. I mean, help us help the business, because at the end of the day, we're all there to make sure that the business grows and does it as, with as much profit as possible. So why don't we all join forces? And I'm never going to be able to do it myself.
Yeah. Great, fascinating. And thank you for sharing those insights. Teddy, I want to ask you the photo negative of that, which is to say, the model that you've implemented, which distributes technology talent across what is actually a remarkably diverse business, as you were describing. We know it for the dairy products, the great butter, et cetera, but the remarkable things on the B2B side that support that among other areas that make up the business of Land O'Lakes. And part of what makes your model work is growing the expertise of your tech talent in each of the areas that they're aligned with. And talk a bit about how you have established that, how you have provided, and perhaps those other organizations, as people develop these kind of hybrid areas of expertise, what facilitates that in the areas that they're aligned with?
Yeah, absolutely. So it kind of stems from, so let's start with, as a technology organization, we have 5 imperatives. One is, as most of you, operational excellence, digital transformation, data and AI, cybersecurity, keep the place safe. But the number one of the 5 is develop superior talent experience. And under that, we have 3 things we think about all the time: org design, culture, and development. Now, in the org design is what Peter's referencing, is how should our organization be designed? So, 3 to 4 years ago, we shift to completely product model, and we started creating all these teams that were, sort of aligned by business unit and some of the larger functions that are centralized within the organization. And then obviously the model I talked about earlier with the sort of 25, 75%, each team sort of had to reflect a little bit of that. Now, the younger talent, the next generation coming in, we don't think about them as being experts because obviously they haven't developed the expertise, but we rotate them amongst these teams. So they develop the subject matter expertise in a given P&L or in a given subject matter area or even in a tech team. And we constantly, from that sort of E5, which is the lowest level, to an E11, we constantly rotate them so they learn both the technology in the various areas of the business as well as the business acumen, which is the biggest part. Can you develop enough business acumen to where when you're in the room, I think somebody mentioned earlier, you can't tell who's IT and who's the business. I mean, that's really critical to be able to get to that spot. And so we were able to slowly start to develop some of that to the point where we even bring in high school students now, right? So we bring them in the pipeline as early as possible, first in tech and then in college, either when they're interns, then they're more into the product teams, and then therefore. So they're really developing that really knowledge of the business itself, which from product teams now we're moving, and I think we heard a little bit earlier about this idea of fusion teams, where, as we work with, our folks in marketing for one of the division, they're like, we have some of the people that are more tech savvy and where there's some things we want to do. Can we create a team with your team? Which I am totally comfortable with, which by the way, I say that now. I'm comfortable now. I wasn't 2 years ago, where it's like, wait, I'm losing my team now. Are they your resources or are they my resources? And the idea was it was this hybrid where the budget's in mind, but that you report into the business unit itself. And these fusion teams now are like value streams. So they have projects or initiatives they go after that are not tech initiatives. They're actually business initiatives that have specific ROI and value associated with it. And our teams are embedded in that, and now we're rotating this younger talent who's really learning that part of it. And what's happening is, what's really exciting to see in this past year is a cross-pollination between our team learning, the subject matter area, and then the other side becoming more tech savvy. Some of them already have that savviness a little bit, but now they're starting to learn about Python coding. And I never thought I could Python code, but But now with generative AI, it might be able to. But there's somebody else that has to teach you how that works and what it really means and how to look for issues. So that's an interesting model that we're starting to see happen more and more. And we've had people from technology now in the other areas, and then we've had other people come into the technology organization, which has been also exciting to see.
Yeah, really interesting. Well, as we think about coding languages and we think about the future of technology, Tigran, you and I recently spoke about, you quoted, I think it's Andre Karpathy, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, who said the next great programming language is English. And fascinating to think, like, it sort of sounds like it's tongue in cheek, and you think further about that, there's a lot that makes sense there. And you talked about how, this is a reality that you're planning for as well. And as you think about tech talent, non-tech talent, training, et cetera, talk a bit about what you're seeing as the evolution from that perspective and the extent to which that quote might become a reality.
Yeah. So he said this in 2023. Now there's multiple different languages, so I'm not sure English is going to win, but the language is probably going to be up there to compete with traditional coding languages. But let me step back for a second and talk about kind of the way we're thinking about key skill sets within our organization. At the bottom, as we've talked about cloud, this resonates with us. Cloud is at the bottom. It's highly technologists kind of need to own that and drive innovation, continuous innovation through the cloud. Right above that is data. Traditionally, data analysts, database administrators, they all were within the technology shop. Now we're saying we have to give that up. Similarly, right? Let's not have shadow IT. Let's have a deal. Half of the data goes to the business, roughly speaking, half of it stays within tech. And at the top is AI, which is for everyone. So with respect to data, what we're doing earlier this year, we created a new position for CDO, or Chief Data Officer. And now, as part of that program, we're heavily investing in data literacy, data quality, data access, data protection. And that is becoming a separate program in itself, being tied to a corporate goal at highest level. And that starts to essentially bring the teams together, obviously in addition with the product management and other competencies, but we're saying at the bare minimum, we got to invest in data. We have to become if we're a data company, we have to be able to mine the data. We've deployed Power BI tools, Domino's, Data Echoes. This is a citizen data scientist approach of building stuff from there, and technology heavily focused on the quality of the data and things like that. And at the top of it is AI, which is Gen AI. And from that standpoint, we started teaching our developers the Gen AI skills. We're rolling this in phases. They're using that to refactor code, to write unit tests, and things like that. A lot of excitement about experience. And our testers said, wait a minute, how come developers are doing this? We want to do it. So we're like, that's a great idea. Let's combine the team. So now we took the testers, developers, it's one engineering family under engineering umbrella who's going to own the quality as well as time to market, capability development. Back to the comment you mentioned. Back in the days, we would do a lot of ETL to get the data to the reporting. Now you have BI tools, right? And I think Andre was talking about, hey, here's an example of 5 different examples that I'm able to write in English sentences with clarity of inputs and outputs that I want the LLM give me back the code. And he was successfully showing that. And then he kind of put the cherry on the cake saying, the next greatest language, is probably English. And there's lots of debates within a development community. What's the next great programming language? Do we invest in JavaScript, Java, Python? But there is this promise that I don't think it is now, but people with great English skills and curiosity, they can iterate a lot with LLMs to do a lot of creative stuff for the company. I think the developers with the code assistant tools will replace developers who don't have that skills, but I don't think English major just yet.
Not just yet. Okay. So maybe it's those of you in the audience that have young children that you should encourage them to become English majors to go into technology. But anyway, this has been a great conversation, as I mentioned at the outset. we are only as successful as the teams that we have, and also only as successful as the skills we are building, making sure that we are constantly pressing the envelope for the skills of the future, not resting on the laurels of the skills of today and yesterday. And what great anecdotes we heard from across this conversation. Tigran, Soumya, Teddy, thank you so much. Won't you join me in thanking them?